Hi, welcome to Facebook Live. This is Mayor John Hamilton, and I've got some friends and colleagues around. We're going to be talking today about a really interesting subject facing city government in our community right now. We'll get into it about compressed natural gas and some different choices we have to make. Let me introduce first who we have here, and then we'll get into a little introductory talk. We have Vic Kelson on my far right, who is the director of the City of Bloomington Utilities. That's kind of all things water that coming in and out of your house or place of business. Then to my immediate right is Autumn Salamak, who is our Director of Sustainability for the city within the Economic Sustainable Development Department. Autumn, thank you for being here. And then to my left is Lou May, who is the Director of the General Manager, is your formal title, I guess, of Bloomington Transit. So all things Bloomington buses. So we've got buses and water and sustainability. And what we want to talk about today is something I mentioned in the State of the City address a couple weeks ago as we were thinking about, as a community, climate change and what is confronting us at the big picture. We're doing a lot of things in the city. We've put up 6,500 solar panels. We're increasing mobility options. We're improving energy efficiency in lots of ways. But there were kind of three things that came together in this big picture of our community that we're facing right now that relate to climate change. And I'll just kind of summarize them like I did then, and then throw it open to you guys to think about. So in the big picture, of course, climate change is a massive challenge to our country, our globe, our community, and thinking about what we can do about it. And the recent report from the International Coalition that talked about the 12-year window we have. So there's a lot of incentive for all of us to think about what we can do. And there are three things going on right now in our community that kind of come together to make us think in a different way, perhaps. Number one, we've just done a study that looked at, from the county side, looked at our waste stream. And we found that 40% of all the waste that we landfill in our community is compostable, meaning it can be turned into soil and compost, and half of that is food waste and half of it's other compostable, and that is a lot of stuff. It's actually 100 tons a day that go into landfill from our county that's compostable material. And we're thinking about, well, does that have to be that way? Are there options there? The second thing that's going on is every year in our community we buy about 500,000 gallons of fuel for city operations, from utilities to bus to snow plows to sanitation trucks. And that's a lot of diesel and gasoline that we buy, fossil fuel, to run city operations. That's a thing to think about too. Can we improve that? And the third thing is our wastewater plant down on the south side needs to be expanded over the coming years. And there's choice about how to do that in a way that could very interestingly combine the waste stream, the need for fuel, and the need to expand our wastewater plant. So that's kind of a teaser about this trio we're thinking about, which we put under the umbrella of compressed natural gas, or CNG, which could be a product of doing some different things that way. So let me ask, maybe we'll just go around the table and ask each of you to frame that choice that you've got to make in your world and how it might mix together, and then start the conversation. So Vic, why don't we start with you? You've got a wastewater plant to deal with.
Yes, our wastewater plant at the Dillman Road plant on the south side is about at 90% of its capacity, plus or minus. At this point, when you get to that point, the state expects us to have a plan for expansion. Right now our capacity is around 15 million gallons per day. We're shooting for getting it to about 20.
Okay.
So right now, when you run a wastewater plant, basically there are organisms that live in the plant and they consume
Very small organisms.
very small microorganisms. That's right.
Okay.
It's not like dogs and cats. It's little critters. And but they consume the organic material that's in the wastewater that we receive from the city.
So this is sewage. This
It's
is
sewage,
people
yeah.
coming through your
That's
flush
right.
toilets and industrial sewage and all that.
Exactly.
Right.
And it all comes in, and those organisms consume that organic material that otherwise, if you just dump it in a creek, it'll take all the oxygen out of the river and kill all the fish. So the biological treatment takes that out. One of the side effects of that is we end up with a whole bunch of microorganisms that eventually die and they become sludge, and we have to get rid of them.
Yeah.
We do, so.
So you gotta expand your plant.
We gotta expand the plant,
Okay.
and when we do that, we're gonna be making more sludge.
Mm-hmm.
We have a choice. When you make that much sludge, you try to reduce the amount of it, and we use something called an anaerobic digester right now, which basically, we put all those organisms in a tank, we keep blowing air through them, and they eat
Tiny
one
bubbles.
exactly, and they eat one another because we don't give them any food. They eat one another, and that reduces the volume.
Okay.
There's another way to do it, which is called an anaerobic digester, where you do it you let the bugs eat each other without giving them food, but you do it with no air.
A sealed container instead of a
Exactly, a
bubble.
sealed tank, yeah.
Yeah.
And then they make methane instead, which is natural gas.
Okay.
And then you can then you have this gas, so you can do something with it. And so that's one option that we have when we talk about plant expansion, but it's expensive.
So right now you have a plant that uses the aerobic method, and as you expand it, you can either keep that method, just do more bubbles and more organisms and more tanks or whatever, or as you expand, you can switch to an anaerobic approach or combination or whatever that then produces methane, compressed natural gas. And that choice you have to make how to expand it in the next year or two or three or whatever.
The next few years,
Yeah. Okay. Autumn.
Well,
What do you see with this?
so from a sustainability perspective, obviously we have very strategic goals about reducing greenhouse gas emissions that tie into both our fuel use for our city fleets, but we're also looking at how we can reduce emissions by diverting more material from the landfill. So like you said, there's a 2017 study from the Monroe County Solid Waste Management District that talks about how many compostables are in our waste stream now. And there's a pretty vibrant community conversation taking place right now, both within the city and within the county, to talk about how are we going to address food waste? How can we actively divert it from the landfill? What sort of composting and food waste drop-off locations could we be discussing right now? And then how can we utilize our existing citizenry to really help create green job economies around food waste? So it's a very prime time to be looking at food waste opportunities for getting it diverted from the landfill.
Okay, good. Before I get to Lou, I should remind folks, if you want to make a comment, throw in a question, please do so via Facebook Live, and we'll try to get it onto the screen here and think about what we can answer for you. So welcome and thanks for joining us. And so Lou, why don't you talk about from the Bloomington Transit perspective, what you've got in front of you.
It's an interesting time that we're at right now at Bloomington Transit. We've got a 50 vehicle fleet, and we're considering what is going to be the fuel of the future for Bloomington Transit. And the two most obvious choices that are before us are the possibility of electric vehicle technology.
All electric.
Yes, battery electric type vehicles, or the possibility of compressed natural gas. So those are the two options. We're really at a crossroads in terms of which way do we go. We're in the process of studying those alternatives, trying to determine what's going to be the best fit for our organization and our community here. With regard to the two choices, electric vehicle technology is rapidly emerging, but it's still not completely perfected yet.
Mm-hmm.
Compressed natural gas, on the other hand, is a much more mature, reliable technology that's been around for at least a couple of decades there. So we have two very interesting choices. The timing is perfect for Bloomington Transit in terms of what the city is doing here. It fits well within our plans.
So yeah, from my seat then, that was kind of interesting that we got a wastewater plant that's got to get expanded, and it has a choice about how to do it. We have a waste stream in our community that is big, and we think we want to figure out how to do it better, maybe, if we can. And then we have transit, Bloomington Transit, and you're not alone, because other vehicles like we have in the city, the sanitation trucks, the plows that we use, Vic, your own trucks, and Vactal, all these, we got a lot of vehicles that are going around. So like BT, we are maybe not as directly, but we're looking at those different ways to propel those vehicles too. So it actually meant this is an interesting combination of choice times that mean, well, maybe we should all get at one table and think about it, because you might make a decision, Lou, for example, just on BT that is right for you, but it could have implications, and same Vic, you could, but it's right for you, or Autumn, right for you in the waste stream, but they actually all interrelate. So what we've talked about is creating a bigger table with a bunch of people to really analyze that, and it's complicated. So
It is.
again, if you want to send in questions or comments, please do so, but maybe we could ask each of you to talk about some of the complexities in that choice. What are the trade-offs from your seat, your lane, if you will, and what that might mean? So who wants to start?
I guess I can. One of the questions is how does sewage and organic waste come together? We've got food waste, we've got sludge that we're trying to reduce the volume, and ultimately composting. That's what composting does, is it reduces the volume of the waste and turns it into something that could be used somewhere else.
So it might be useful to know right now, those don't really mix much. Your sewage flow is your sewage flow.
Exactly.
And then we have this big flow of trash, if you will, compostables that are picked up by trucks and sent to landfills. And those two streams do not intersect much.
They don't intersect.
Yeah.
And West Lafayette has an anaerobic digester. They're now feeding some food waste from Purdue University into their anaerobic digester to digest the food waste and convert it into and generate more methane. So basically, they're trying to increase the amount of gas that they make from their digester by spiking it with this other organic material.
We got this picture, this big tank full of your bugs that are eating without air, and they're eating all the sewage. You bring a big truck full of food waste and you just inject it into that, and it's more fuel or food for the bugs, or they
more food for the bugs and makes more methane. So
and gets rid of the food, or reduces the food waste volume.
Yeah, and ultimately both the digester or composting do basically the same thing. They reduce the volume of the waste and make it into something. In the case of compost, it can be applied to the land. You can do that with sewage sludge too after it's been digested, and lots of cities do it. And we're presently not doing it, but a lot of cities do.
I guess that's important to note, that there are people now who compost that food waste either in their own backyard or a compostable bin they use, or there's some services that collect it. Actually, at my house, we're part of one that collects. Green Camino collects and takes it to a facility that does this, I guess, just on the land kind of composting. This is just a more kind of intense industrialized composting, it sounds like. I don't know, Autumn, does that make sense to you?
Yeah. Composting when you reduce the volume of waste by composting, you make carbon dioxide. But
Which is not good.
But you're going to do it eventually anyway. It's one way or the other. But if you do it in an anaerobic digester, you make natural gas that you burn on the way. You still get the carbon dioxide, but you also recovered energy from it. So there's a little bit of a benefit there.
Okay.
And it could be a big benefit if you have enough gas.
Yeah. Okay. So you got to decide, and I don't know if you've said, but doing the anaerobic is more expensive.
Way more expensive.
Right now.
Yeah.
Way more expensive.
Way more expensive because we'd have to change the way our plant works. We'd have to add some new clarifiers, and it'd be an expensive operation to do it.
Is there any long-term benefit to switching?
Long-term, the plant as it sits today, we could get it to 20 million gallons per day without an anaerobic digester, but we couldn't get it to 25. So if we
Could not get it.
off in the distant future, if we're trying to get to 25 million gallons per day, we really will need to go to something like an anaerobic digester. We're going to have to expand the plant
I see.
a little bit more. So right now, 20 probably gets us out 10 or 15 years. That all depends. If there's more growth, if there's big industrial facilities, and so forth. So plus it's sitting right next to I-69, so we don't know what's going to happen.
Right. Okay. Autumn, how about you? What are some of the choices or hard balancing or cost issues, I guess? I don't know.
Yeah, so one of them is if we were to bring food waste into this equation and bring food waste to the wastewater treatment plant, there's obviously some complexity around how do we collect that food waste. Are we taking it just from residential or just commercial, sort of food-based properties. There's also a question of what happens to that existing food waste now if we're trying to really strengthen up the composting market and making that as a soil amendment directly. There is potential, like Vic said, for that sludge to also serve as a soil amendment through
Soil amendment, that sounds kind of technical. That's like stuff you put in your ground to make it more fertile.
Yeah,
Like-
that's what compost is.
Okay.
Compost is a soil amendment, yeah.
A soil amendment, okay.
So there's still an opportunity for that if you're taking that food waste and having it be part of this anaerobic digestion process, but it would change a little bit some of the existing businesses and business
Yeah.
models that we
Yeah.
have in the community.
Let me ask, and if I don't want to interrupt, but your train of thought, but who would be the key partners? I think about big institutions like school systems or, I don't know, universities or things like, who would be the key partners for that food stream? Because each of our houses, we have a little bit of food every day, but there are some places that have a lot of food waste every day.
We have over 600 food service establishments in the city of Bloomington, over 600, which is a lot for a town this
Wow.
size.
Okay.
And a lot of them have grease interceptors installed. Those grease interceptors have to be pumped out. Right now, that grease
They're
just
putting
goes.
that into the sewer, you mean?
Well, we're trying to keep it out.
I
of
know,
the
maybe,
sewer.
but food waste, some of it's currently going.
Some of it does, certainly, yeah. And so the grease comes down to Dillman now, and we dump it into a lagoon, and the sun, it sits in the sun and oxidizes away. And that grease, those oils and things that come out of those interceptors, that'd be pretty good in a digester. It creates a lot of opportunity there.
So who else are the partners we'd want to?
Yes, I think you're right. I think it's the university, it's the school system,
Hospital.
hospital, possibly like even some of our larger employers like Cook that have cafeterias. A lot of the people that we're working with on Eurofood actions now about their purchasing, they also they have a large enough scale to be part of our purchasing conversation, so they have a large enough scale to be part of the compost and food waste collection conversation. Another piece though is that a lot of the wastewater treatment plants that we know about that are currently utilizing this technology, they're creating essentially natural gas that can be used to fuel the treatment plant itself. They're using it on site or they're potentially selling it back to the grid. There's some application of using that gas for like light duty vehicles, but there's a little bit of there might still be a little bit of a technological gap there as well that we need to address. And then the last piece from my perspective is we're always thinking about greenhouse gas emissions and how do you compare one option for how you deal with food waste or how you're fueling your vehicles with another, and it very quickly becomes very complex because there's so many different steps.
Places in moving food, what are all the greenhouse gas implications of all those steps?
Yes.
You get to figure that out.
Right.
Okay.
And this summer we are doing a community greenhouse gas emissions inventory that I think will be looking at a very wide scope of emissions sources for the community as part of a partnership with IU and the Environmental Resilience Institute. So there's some conversation that'll be taking place this summer along those lines. But.
Great. Okay. Lou, all right, what are the balancing issues, the questions, costs, pluses and minuses you look at from your lane?
Well, from a public transportation perspective, the use of natural gas to power vehicles has got a lot of benefits for sure. We know, for example, the cost of natural gas is about half the cost of diesel fuel, for example. So the energy that it takes to propel a bus for every mile is again about half.
That saves you money.
So
You
a
can
big,
use money
big
for other
budget
things.
cost savings there for sure. And there's some other things relative to cost as well. Natural gas tends to be a less volatile fuel in terms of price. It's not subject to market conditions such as diesel fuel might be. Diesel fuel will go up and down dramatically depending on market conditions. Again, natural gas is less volatile in price there, so that helps when it comes time to budget the cost of fuel for our vehicles. There's some other important benefits though that go with using natural gas in buses. Of course, we're not leaving as large a carbon footprint on our community when we use natural gas. use of natural gas gives off less greenhouse gases compared to the use of diesel fuel there.
Okay.
So the cleaner
That's
our
part of your calculations, right? Gotta go on that, yeah.
yeah, so the cleaner the air is, the more livable our community is, the better the quality of life right here in Bloomington there. I mentioned it, natural gas is a much more mature technology. It's been around several decades. Many public transit fleets are using natural gas across the country. Right here in Indiana, Lafayette and South Bend have made the decision to go to natural gas there. And especially as you contrast that with the newer technologies such as electric vehicles, battery electric vehicles, which is still an emerging technology and is still not fully mature yet there. So
How about price of buses? Are they different between the?
yeah, there's certainly some
choices.
challenges that go with making a transition to natural gas. Some of those challenges are the price of buses. We've got about a 15% premium on the cost of a natural gas engine compared to a diesel bus there. So you have a number of upfront costs.
How about electric?
investments.
How does electric compare?
Electric is about twice the cost of a
I
diesel vehicle there. So as
Maybe changing in the years and decades ahead, but it's, right
Pri-
now it's.
price could very well come down, and I would expect that to be the case with electric. CNG again is only about a 15% upgrade.
Okay.
There's other challenges, investments, upfront investments that have to be made to use CNG. Of course, we would have to build a fueling station at our garage
Yeah.
somewhere in the community. There's a price tag of $1 to $2 million that
Okay.
go with that fueling station. And then secondly, we would need the space, the physical space to locate that. And we
Okay.
would probably have to acquire some additional property to do that. And that brings a cost with it. So those are the primary challenges that we would face relative to making the change to natural gas.
Okay, just one note, I think everybody knows this, but one of the facts of southern Indiana too, right now anyway, is even if we were to do electric buses, most of our electricity that we get off the grid is done by burning coal, right? So while the buses may be clean in their
That's right.
operations with electric, right now, and we certainly want to see this changing, but most of the electricity that's available to charge those buses is from a coal-fired, or maybe natural gas, but a lot of coal-fired
That's right.
plants.
So-
So that's part of your calculation too, right? You gotta think about that. So, we do have a couple questions. Actually, it looks like we have three. Let me just run through these. One is, somebody, Sue, thank you, says, well, what should we do with our food waste? I think that means like right now, what should we be doing with our food waste? And she follows by saying, I know some people are not installing garbage disposals now to avoid putting all that food waste into Vic's sewage system. And that has changed at my house, for example. When you get a composting bucket, you just don't put any food down there if you can. So that's one question. You can be thinking about that. And then we got another one that is from Halt. Thank you. And that is, what is your plan if you use more CNG than you produce? Does buying more CNG to make up the difference offset the gains by using a digester? CNG is nice because it burns cleanly, but it often does just divert pollution to wherever it's extracted from. And so he says it's very important to think about if you get dependent on CNG and then you don't make enough, you got to think about where it's coming from. And so I'll let you comment on that too. So who wants to take
I'll let
those?
you go first.
Want to start with Sue
Where
and her
does it go?
question about what
Yeah.
are you supposed to do with all your food waste?
Yeah, so I mean, number one, we always say that the most important thing to do is to try to reduce the amount of food waste that you're creating. So planning out meals, making sure that you're really utilizing leftovers and eating them, and getting creative with how you can make sure you're not creating food waste. That
Reduce
said,
the waste first.
yeah, reduce the waste. Reduction is always goal number one. But if you do have food waste, certainly there are various options for composting. So if you have your own backyard area, you can create a composting bin, or you can purchase contained bins that can very easily be used to generate that soil amendment. If you don't have an outdoor space of your own, you can also do vermicomposting, which is essentially putting worms into a tub
Okay, now we're talking.
with your food
Okay, there we go.
waste.
Okay, we're getting colorful now, yeah.
That can be,
A lot of worms.
yeah,
Okay.
a lot of worms, but it doesn't take a lot of space, and it's
Okay.
great if you just have like a backyard patio. And then, like the mayor mentioned, there are some services in town now too that will actually pick up your food waste scraps on a weekly or bi-weekly basis.
So if somebody wants to find out more about this, who do they contact? Call you or Center for Sustainable Living, or where are some places
Yeah,
to get
yeah.
more information?
You can
on the
certainly,
web?
you can certainly contact me. You can also look online for the Center for Sustainable Living and Green Camino and JB's
Salvage?
Salvage, thank you.
Salvage is doing
JB's
that.
Salvage, they also are doing compost,
Yeah.
food waste collection these days.
Yeah.
And the remark about garbage disposals is actually a really accurate remark. Recently, just 2 weeks ago, the council approved our new sewer use ordinance amendments. And one of the things is that we no longer allow garbage disposers in
Mm.
food service establishments.
Mm.
And actually, we haven't been allowing them to be replaced for
Is
7
that
or
right?
8 years, so there
Right.
probably aren't very many of them left. And the reason is simply that. You put a whole bunch of food waste in, and you grind it up, and then the next thing you know, we're treating it at the wastewater plant. And,
Yeah.
and so we try to control fog, that's fats, oils, and grease in our sewers, because it plugs the sewers, but it also costs money for us to treat it. So
So are these,
you don't want
I
this-
kind of have this picture of this magic, I don't know when they were invented, 1950s, I don't know, like, this is awesome, you can just chew up all your food and send it down the drain, and it's a miracle, and it's awesome, and now we're like, well, it's actually not that awesome,
It
and it's
disappears,
it's
yeah.
not that good.
Well,
And
it's
there
like
are
the
better
baby
things to do
wipes,
with it.
right? Yeah, the
Yeah.
wipes are flushable, but they plug up the plant, so.
Any other comments on those points? We actually have another,
Oh, the
Question
last
coming
one
in.
about the methane, what do you do?
yes,
if you
the
don't make
CNG, if you don't have enough, are you
Well,
getting dependent?
that's exactly what happens. I mean, if you're using gas to power the fleet or anything else, and certainly if you don't make as much as you're going to use, you're going to have to get some off the pipeline. It's still better than burning diesel. And again, it goes back to reducing, right? If we're still going to be driving the vehicles, we have to power them somehow. And that's part of the challenge. You know, we have
And
to-
presumably, part of the analysis that we would do as part of the study committee effort would be to evaluate how many gallons or units of CNG are going to be able to produce with your anaerobic digester there. And will that be sufficient to meet the fleet needs of both the city and Bloomington Transit?
And, you know, and the other thing is, we need to get more people into the buses, because the more people who are riding the buses, we're talking reducing. The more
Right.
people who ride the bus, the fewer cars that we have driving around also burning gasoline or.
That's a whole level of improvement.
Another
That
piece.
If CNG saves money, or it creates opportunity to buy buses that are less expensive than another alternative, that lets you do more service in the abstract, at least, you know, that you're more efficient and can carry more people, and that's all good. We do have another question. Let me just first say, please keep sending the questions and comments in. We appreciate that. And you're listening to Lou May, the General Manager of Bloomington Transit, Autumn Salamack, the Director of Sustainability for the City of Bloomington, and Vic Kelson, the Head of City of Bloomington Utilities, all things water. And it also just reminds me that what I said we need to do next is look at this issue with a task force of people, because there are a lot of moving parts, and it is really complicated. And it may be that Lou says, hey, it's worth it to me, but Vic says, well, look, it's going to cost me $5 or $10 million more dollars, and the wider community needs to think about that. Is that a smart investment as a whole to be done now in light of all this stuff? And it's just really complicated, and I'm going to be appointing a number of people to a task force to really dig into this and analyze it over up to a year to look at all these implications, permutations, options, and then come back with a recommendation. So we appreciate the comments and questions. Let's see, I've got one from Denise. Thank you, Denise. How can the city or have the studies considered ways to encourage more solar installations on private homes and new construction or replacement construction, for example, on roof replacements? Well, I love that question. We and you do too. You know, we care a lot about solar, and not only is the city doing a lot, we've put in 6,500 solar panels over the last couple of years, and we have about another 4,000 or 5,000 panels to go, including at some of your sites, I know, to increase our solar production. We have an amazing and wonderful partnership with Siren, Southern Indiana Renewable Energy Network, is that right?
Solar, yeah.
Which has helped put something like 200 solar installations in private homes. We help with wholesale prices on those panels because we're buying so many. They're awesome and they do great training, and if you're interested in that, go on the website and look at that. We did it on our house and it was terrific. They make it so easy as somebody, you don't have to figure it all out yourself. So I don't know, Autumn, if you want to add to that while I look at the next question.
Yeah, the 2019 round of Solarize is kicking off in May. So if you go to the city website and look for Solarize Bloomington, you can find information about upcoming information sessions and contact for Siren volunteers as well.
And actually, there's a partnership with another group whose acronym I can't,
Indiana Solar for All.
That's it, where we're helping low-income homeowners who might not be able to front the cost or cover the cost of a solar installation, but we have a program to try to help get solar roofs on some lower-income homeowners too. We've done a dozen or more, and we want to expand that, and that partnership with them is really helpful too. So go for it. Sue also asked. Sue is, thank you. What do we do with meat compost? She really wants to figure this out. Like, can't put it in compost. What do we do with meat waste? Should it go in the trash?
So yeah, if you're backyard composting, you don't want to put meat or bones in there. If your food waste is going to an industrial composting facility, like where Green Camino is currently taking theirs and where the university dining services is taking their waste, then you can include meat and bones. But otherwise,
Either
no.
goes to an animal, your dog, or in the trash.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of that stream of compostables. Yeah. All right. So what else should we be thinking about? What are the issues that we haven't talked about yet that are implicated in this, either good or bad, that you think about?
As you said, I think that the hard part of this is there are so many moving parts. We can't look at any piece of this without looking at all of it, and it gets extremely complicated, as Autumn has said, because if you look at the whole thing, ultimately, if you start with organic waste, whether it's from a wastewater plant or whether it's from the garbage, ultimately, if we're reducing its volume, we're converting part of it to carbon dioxide. The question is,
Which is
what's the
greenhouse gas,
greenhouse gas?
which we're trying to reduce.
That's right. So if we can make methane out of part of it and use that to power vehicles, then it reduces the amount of greenhouse gases we would have made otherwise. We also reduces the amount that we have to haul if we're hauling it off to landfill. I'm sure that's a big part of our footprint is right now we haul that sludge
100 tons a day, and
you know.
that we're getting trucked all over the place.
And
That's right.
there's lots of other things. The volume of landfill space.
Yeah.
It just these things just continue to pile on each other in terms of complexity. So sorting out the places where you're maybe double counting a benefit, or places where you may have missed a cost that you didn't pay attention to. It's a complicated equation.
And I think an important point that we don't want to miss here is thinking about natural gas being a renewable resource. You know, we normally think of it as a fossil fuel that's coming out of the ground through fracking or whatever. The reality is this is a fuel that can be generated from waste, and it's just a matter of converting it and capturing it so that it's not flared off or sent into the atmosphere there. And so, and again, we don't think of natural gas as renewable,
but it can be if it's done this way. I mean, for me, thinking about the city and kind of our long trajectory and resilience, the idea of taking what is a waste stream now, and we do want to reduce that waste stream, but it's substantial, and kind of creating this circle where we reduce that waste stream, we convert it into fuel locally, and locally we use that fuel to move vehicles around with people in them or other things in them, and that circle, if you will, that is local, has real appeal, both because of the climate change impacts, but also frankly because of resilience. Like I don't know what energy supplies, how they may change or get disrupted, and having some local ability to generate local energy from a renewable source, anyway, it has some appeal that way, but it is really complicated. We got a couple more questions that are interesting, I think, here. Jennifer, thank you. She says, will the digesting plant stink? That's a good question. If so, having it, where it's located might be problematic. So what's the story with that?
I have been to anaerobic digesters that stink. I have been to anaerobic digesters that don't stink. And
How do we pick the other?
well, we would aim for the non-stinky one. A lot of that is how you operate it and what kinds of gas scrubbing there is.
But it's a factor.
It is a factor. It's certainly something that has to be.
Where are you? Tell people where you are located right now, Dillman plant,
We're-
and whether you have odor issues there or not.
Yeah, we're at Dillman Road and Highway 37, so just south of the I-69 and I-37 interchange. And we
Southwest side of town. Down.
Yeah, sort of southwest side. And that plant isn't stinky. It smells sort of like soil.
Okay.
Because we don't separate out what's called primary sludge, where you just let the water go in a big tank. The wastewater comes from the city, goes in a big tank. The solid parts, we won't mention what they are, sink to the bottom, and then you pump it away. That stuff is great to put in a digester. It would make a lot of gas, but it's stinky, so you have to manage the way you deal with all of that. Plus, the digester itself can make sulfur smell come out of it.
So it is a question about odor. We've seen it good and bad.
But it can be.
I vote for good.
It's manageable. I've been to
Okay.
plants that stink and some that don't.
All right. Let's see. We got a question about, because they're coming fast. So I don't know. One is, are there other communities doing this sort of thing successfully?
West Lafayette is doing it at some scale,
mentioned,
right?
yeah,
They're bringing in waste from Purdue. I don't know that they're fueling vehicles with it. I know they use some of it to move to operate. Some of it's used to operate the plant because you do need to put a little bit of heat into the digester. Fort Wayne has an anaerobic digester. They digest sewage sludge there, and they do cogeneration. So what happens is they take the gas.
That's a new term. What's that mean?
Cogeneration
All
is
right.
where you make the digester gas and then you burn it in an electrical generator. And so they make electricity that offsets their electric bill. So some of their gas goes to keeping the plant running, some of their gas goes to make electricity to keep the plant running. So, and
Some people may, Vic's water treatment plants and the wastewater plants use, I think, almost half of the city's electric consumption
yeah,
for all the stuff we do. So you're a heavy energy user. So.
Yeah, the Dillman plant is the largest electrical customer in Monroe County.
And that's blowing all that stuff and pumping things.
Blowers and pumps, yeah.
Yeah, and so one use of CNG also to look at is just using it right at the plant to power all the plant itself.
That's another option.
Cogeneration.
And then we wouldn't be doing all the fleet activities, we would
Right.
just be doing cogeneration.
Right, and that ought to be looked at too. Jump in if you have answers. There's questions I'm going to just kind of summarize. One is asking about, do we analyze our carbon footprint right now as a community? And I know you can talk about that. Another is whether we can look at other sources like animal waste as a source in an anaerobic digester. And another is, what are we doing right now in the closed landfill, we meaning the community, in terms of trying to capture methane from our landfill that we currently have that's closed? And I don't know if anybody has comments on those.
First one,
Sorry, throwing a lot at you.
greenhouse gas emissions, yes. So
Inventory.
the city conducted an inventory of greenhouse gas emissions for municipal operations back in 2015. And then the Commission on Sustainability conducted a community-wide greenhouse gas emissions inventory in 2016. So those are our current inventories, but like I said, this summer we have a full-time intern coming through the Indiana Sustainable Development Program at IU and the Environmental Resilience Institute, who's going to be part of a cohort working with, I think, around 10 cities in the state of Indiana that will all be conducting community greenhouse gas emissions inventories at the same time using the ClearPath software. which is a really great tool. And I'm hoping that that in turn can also conduct our municipal operations inventory at the same time, because it's a key piece of your community emissions. It takes a lot of time and data to complete those inventories, so they typically don't happen every single year. I think in our sustainability action plan, we recommend doing them every 2 years to make sure that we're sort of measuring progress, but also being sensitive of time and resource constraints.
Okay. Any other comments on the landfill or animal waste or other things that might be fed into a anaerobic digester?
Well, one of the challenges, that I didn't mention earlier is that when you start mixing food waste with, with
The sewage waste.
sewage waste, is that sewage sludge is pretty consistent, and the volumes of it are pretty consistent. But the food waste kind of comes in fits and starts, has different compositions, and it changes a lot. So operationally, it can be tricky. So
The plant has more variability in what's coming into it.
right, makes it a little harder to operate. And
Okay.
so as you start looking at different waste streams, whether it's animal waste or any of these other things, that may be a problem. Now, animal waste, you can also just put it in a landfill and seal it and then catch the gas. It's gonna make, that's basically a big anaerobic digester, and you
If
can
you
catch
seal
you can, if you catch it. And, but they are doing digestion, was it that place up on 65 on the way to Chicago? That farm place.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, there's a big place up there that,
Huh.
and they
Being
do,
done.
and
Yeah,
they're
large livestock
yeah, they're
Yeah.
digestion.
operations with a lot of manure,
Yeah.
there's
Yes.
anaerobic digestion
I
taking
can't
place,
remember
yeah.
that. But they make gas there,
Okay.
so it can be done.
I know we did have a couple visuals. I don't know if they made one can give the sense of the scale of our waste. What might be interesting, when we started, maybe if we show the mix of the county's waste, which came from the study you referenced that the Solid Waste District did, and it struck me anyway how a big piece of that pie, the wedges, were compostable, and part of that's food and part of it's not, and then there are other parts of it, but that was pretty striking.
Yeah,
So that lets you see that, and that's available online too, all the different components of our waste stream. Let's see, so who do we want on this task force? What do you think are the voices that we need? By the way, if you're interested, let us know. It's going to have to be a group of hardworking, smart people who help us figure all this out, some of whom are around the table right now, I'm sure. But we will be looking to analyze this with both. It's really not just a city decision, it's really kind of a community-wide, other institutions need to be involved.
Yeah, a lot of the economics depend on volume, and we've looked at anaerobic digestion at the plant already,
Mhm.
but doing with just our sludge, or even with our sludge plus what we could get from IU, it just didn't make it financially. So it's expensive to build, and it's a change in the operation. So the big question for me is, when we look at things in terms of the triple bottom line, where you include the economics, the benefits to the community, and the benefits to the environment, we need to look at all of those things together. Where does that come out? And does food waste tip it one way or the other, or is
Or
it
how
more
much you
effective
need.
to compost the food waste? Which is the most effective way to achieve it, and which is the mix of all these different technologies and strategies and approaches? What mix works the best? That's a really challenging analysis.
Mhm. And we have other bus systems in town too, right? Other
Yeah, and
users.
certainly all the public fleets that we have in the Bloomington and Monroe County area, whether it's the city, Bloomington Transit, the county, schools.
School buses, are some
Here.
school buses run on CNG? Do you
There
know?
are in other portions of the country.
Yeah,
They are
yeah.
using natural gas and to power school buses. And then, of course, we have a major university here that has their own fleet of vehicles that I think would be good candidates.
Any scooters run on natural gas? No, I'm just kidding. No, all right. Fair Oaks Farm, is that the name? Somebody
Fair Oaks
said?
Farms,
There you
that's
go.
the one.
Thank you all, we appreciate that, from a brain freeze. Yeah, well, look, I think, what I wanted to share in this, and it was the sense of really big opportunity because of all these pieces, the timing because of the decisions that need to be made, and the fact that as a community, it is a really big opportunity. It's also very complicated, and we want, one of the things in city government is, I've often said, we want to try things. They won't all work, and like in the new economy, you want to fail fast and you want to fail cheap. Well, this is not a cheap thing. This is a big thing that we can't just kind of play around with. It feels like we have to really try to get serious study about these options from the different viewpoints. And climate change is this looming challenge for us, and what do we do about it? How do we respond to it? And we're doing many things. We're always thinking about it, and we have the sustainability plan, and more solar, and more transportation options, and more reduction of waste. But this is kind of a big attack on that challenge of climate change to me, if we can figure this out. So I don't know, we got kind of closing comments maybe, if you want to share anything from your thoughts about it, and then we'll thank the audience for listening, and if you have final questions, shoot them in real quick, but why don't we just give some final comments?
Well, we at Bloomington Transit are delighted to be a part of the study committee, and we think it's important. As I mentioned, we're at a crossroads at Bloomington Transit. What is going to be the fuel of the future for us? And so the timing of this is perfect, and we look forward to working with you, Mayor.
Great.
I think from a sustainability standpoint, there's a lot of opportunity here, and I think it's a complex issue, but there's also a really great opportunity to really keen in on the environmental and economic elements of a sustainability program. And like you said, resiliency is key, and part of what we're doing this year is looking at climate vulnerability assessments for the community and starting to work on climate adaptation planning for our community as well. So thinking about fuel sources and what we can provide locally and what do we do in the event of natural disasters is a really important piece of this too.
Yeah.
And going forward, we do expect the city's going to grow. And as the city grows, the amount of waste that we have to deal with grows, both in terms of wastewater and sewage treatment, and also we have to find ways to just manage how the rest of the waste stream grows. So if there's an opportunity here for us to reduce greenhouse emissions and reuse some of these materials that we otherwise have to get rid of, it's a good idea, but it is complicated, and the answers are not obvious on this.
Well, we talk about the word complicated a few times today. I appreciate and look forward to a task force that will wrestle with this on all our behalves. It is complicated, but they are big stakes and big opportunities, and it's very exciting to think about what can come for us. And I look forward to the same kind of collaborative approach that we had here among all the players to evaluate this on our behalf. Let me thank again Vic Kelson, the Director of City of Bloomington Utilities, the water utility in the city, Autumn Salamak, who runs sustainability for the city, and Lou May, who is the General Manager of Bloomington Transit. We don't give enough shout out to Laura Collins, our fabulous producer of all things Facebook. Thank you, Laura, for making this happen. And we thank all of you for paying attention, and we will carry forward with this idea, and stay tuned as more information will be coming. Thanks a lot.